clients, it's been really challenging, and answering emails, and my God, don't even get me started on YouTube. It's just like the fam, I love them, but they just want like more extravagant intros, more elaborate, plot themes and stuff of that nature. And it's a lot.
That makes a lot of sense. And it seems as though you do put a lot of pressure on yourself to be successful. How does Zach feel though?
It just feels like this deep hitting sensation that I have in my chest that it almost feels like it's compressed and I can't, get it to expand.
Think, not be perfect, not be the best, but recognize that young Zach is good enough.
You're right. You always are, man.
Do you have any coping strategies, any stress relievers?
You're right, I don't.
Well, in my practice, I am one of the foremost experts in utilizing breathing techniques to help people manage their stress levels when things get a little hairy.
Oh, you want to do a breathing exercise? Cool, that's totally right in my wheelhouse. So yeah, let's do it.
So you're just gonna sit back, relax, close your eyes, and I want you to take a big, deep, diaphragmatic breath into your belly. And as you do that, you're going to...
What did you just say?
Well, we want you to have a good diaphragmatic breath into your belly.
It's not how you diaphragmatically breathe.
Zach, it's just a breathing exercise. Relax, calm down. I'm just utilizing diaphragmatic breathing, deep into the belly to just help you de-stress.
Last time I checked, the lungs are not in the abdominal contents. And what about the rib cage? Don't you think that's supposed to move? How are the lungs going to fill?
Zach, come to your senses. This is madness.
Madness, huh? This isn't madness. This is breathing. As you can see, folks, it grinds my gears when people do not perform diaphragmatic breathing correctly. Hello, everybody. Zach Couples, physical therapist here, and folks, I am a big advocate of all things breathing. Aside from the classic research showing that if you don't breathe, you're going to die, there actually was a recent systematic review that illustrated that diaphragmatic breathing can aid in minimizing stress and anxiety. Now we have a strategy that can impact our psychological state of well-being, and it can also help with us from a movement perspective. But here's the problem. None of these researchers who look into utilizing diaphragmatic breathing really grasp the biomechanics behind how we breathe in and breathe out. If you get anyone who's coaching belly breathing, they don't understand the normal respiratory mechanics of breathing. And I think that they're missing a huge component, because if you can grasp that, not only can you get the psychological benefits of slow breathing, but you can also maximize the movement dynamics that should happen. So what I'm going to teach you wonderful, outstanding people in today's video is the proper way to diaphragmatically breathe that not only allows you to get the autonomic benefits of breathing, but maximizes the biomechanical improvements that you can see from utilizing this strategy. We have to grasp the underlying goal of inhalation and exhalation to really determine what diaphragmatic breathing should look like. Now, generally what's going to happen is as I take a breath of air in, my body, if this was my body, is going to expand in all directions. And this allows me to maximally fill the lungs with air. And then when I exhale, the body's going to get smaller in all directions to squeeze all the air out. And one way that your body does this is through this wonderful muscle called the diaphragm. And what the diaphragm does is it acts like a syringe. So if you look at this syringe right here, don't ask me why I have it, but when I pull this down, if this was in liquid, right, liquid would get sucked into the syringe. And the reason why is because as I pull this plunger down, there creates a negative pressure situation within the syringe, water goes in. Folks, Your diaphragm is essentially this plunger in the syringe. When the diaphragm descends like that, the guts, which are right here, so your abdominal viscera gets displaced downward. That's where you get that belly breathing. The pelvis changes its shape and expands in all directions to increase surface area for that viscera to move downward. And that's where you should get the guts, because they're incompressible, so you can't make them smaller. But the guts move into the front of the ab wall and the sides of the ab wall, and they also push the spine backwards. So when you breathe in, you should really see the circumferential expansion throughout the abdominal wall. And then conversely, when I exhale, the diaphragm ascends, and that's because the pelvis gets smaller, it squeezes the viscera upward. The pelvic floor, which we didn't talk about during the inhalation, ascends. That also pushes the viscera upward, and that causes the diaphragm to go back to its ascended eccentric position, which then leads to air being squeezed out because the rib cage also compresses in all directions. Now, folks, the problem with belly breathing, or the way most people coach diaphragmatic breathing, is they only focus on the abdominal component. What they don't focus on is the rib cage component. Now, folks, your lungs sit in the rib cage. And if I'm going to be filling the lungs with air, which, folks, they're not in your belly, wouldn't you think that this would have to kind of get bigger in all directions to make room for it? And in fact, it does. According to the seminal paper by Detroyer, Mechanics of Respiratory Muscles, don't worry, it's linked below, but that paper illustrated the way the muscles between the ribs, the intercostals, work during inhalation. In fact, they have a synergistic effect with the diaphragm, because as the diaphragm descends, the lower rib cage expands, but then the peristernal intercostals, which are the ones that surround the sternum, contract, and that helps move the front of the rib cage forward and upward. This is called the pump handle action, meaning, guess what? Your chest has to move a little bit. Conversely, you'll also get the intercostals on the sides contracting to some extent to allow me to expand the rib cage side to side. So much like the abdominal wall, the rib cage should expand in all directions as you breathe in. And then conversely, you have muscles like the transversus thoracis and some of the other intercostals that will squeeze the rib cage in all directions, and that's going to allow air to maximally evacuate the lungs. And that's really the problem with the way conventional diaphragmatic breathing is taught, is everyone is talking about minimizing the chest component, which I get why. They're really trying to minimize accessory breathing, which is where you use more superficial musculature to lift the rib cage up as a unit. But you don't want to do that at sacrificing the normal actions that should happen at the rib cage, which is this segmental expansion of the ribs in all directions. And folks, this isn't like I just pulled up some paper to support my own biases. If you go ahead and you Google or you YouTube any type of dynamic MRI of the ventral cavity, thorax, abdomen, pelvis, as you breathe in and breathe out, you're going to see that the ribs move and expand as the lungs fill. And so if we're not coaching breathing in this manner, where we're allowing not just the ab wall to fill in all directions, but also the rib cage, then we're really not doing our supreme clientele biomechanical justice.
Now, after I've told you all that, you're probably thinking a lot of different things like that. Really that important if I coach belly breathing? Is it going to be deleterious? Why did you change clothes right in the middle of the video? Well, the reason why I think this is important is it goes back to the concept of when I breathe in, I want to create expansion in all directions every which way. And then when I breathe out, I want to get smaller so I can maximally move air. When I do that, what that does is it balances the pressure within the thoracic and abdominal cavity. Conversely, what happens is if I do not let the chest wall move, I essentially create a squeezing effect in the top of the thorax, and what that does is that pushes most of the air down towards the bottom of the lungs. And why is that necessarily not a good thing? Well, If we want to create adequate movement of air, if I'm squeezing the top of the thoracic cavity, that really shrinks the upper airway, that shrinks the lung field, and it limits the amount of air that can get into our bodies. And so you got to figure, well, if I'm not getting as good a gas exchange, does that impact my autonomic state? Maybe I could be more stressed. Does that potentially impact my ability to run aerobic metabolism and things of that nature? I don't know. But what I do know is if I do belly breathing and I don't allow the chest wall to move, I've now created a mismatch in pressures between the thoracic and abdominal cavity. And based on me essentially limiting the diameter of the thorax, and if I've limited the diameter of the thorax because I'm not allowing it to expand, that alters pressures in a matter where most of the volume goes low, and maybe that is a contributing factor to increased muscle tension and activity in the thorax, among other things. Point being, if you're trying to be chillin' like Bob Dylan with diaphragmatic breathing, you're probably not super duper chill if you are not allowing the chest wall to fill. Now that we got that biomechanical belly breathing disc track out the way, let's go into what accessory breathing looks like, what belly breathing looks like, and what we should actually be doing instead. I'm first going to illustrate the differences by giving you a view of both the ab wall and the torso with my shirt off. First, I'm going to show you the accessory breathing strategy and what this looks like. This is the thing that belly breathing is trying to fix, albeit poorly. So if I do accessory breathing, what you're going to see is you're going to see minimal movement in the ab wall, a lot of movement in the torso and the neck. We'll get to that in a minute. It's going to look like that. See just how engaged my neck is when I do this. You ready? Notice you see the rib cage move up and down. Nothing's happening in the belly. And of course, belly breathing looks like this, and this is how it's trying to fix that. It's trying to dampen what's going on in the chest wall, focus mostly on the stomach, like so. Now what you're going to see is a limitation in the intersegmental motion of the rib cage, like so. Ready? There we can see we've eliminated that accessory muscle activity, but it came at a cost. And the cost, folks, was we're not getting any expansion action in the rib cage. So the lungs are predominantly filling in the bottom. That ain't good for your mobility gains upstairs. What we should see instead is we should see the ab wall and the thorax fill together, just like so. You can see how my hand moves, my neck is chill. Just so you can see without that. That is the type of breathing strategy we want to advocate and see if we're trying to improve someone's movement capabilities, and even to some extent when I'm just coaching quiet breathing to calm someone down. Now let's go into how in the heck to do it. Here's how I do it. I'll put one hand on the stomach, I'll put one hand on the chest, and then in terms of just focusing mostly through the nose, you're going to place your tongue completely up against the roof of your mouth, but don't force it. Lips are lightly closed, and then what you want to think about is imagine that you are trying to be very sneaky. You don't want anyone to hear you breathing. You're just going to quietly breathe in and out through your nose. You don't have to think too much about it. Just kind of let it happen. Take your time. And it's going to look like this.
With something as simple as that, we're getting legit diaphragmatic breathing because the diaphragm is allowed to descend. You're getting the intercostals to expand the rib cage, so that way you get adequate fill throughout. Now, if you're trying to improve movement in specific areas, you're going to want to move a little bit more air. So in that situation, I'm going to coach a nice, long, slow exhale through the mouth. And what we want to see is we want to see the rib cage move, but we also want to see the ab wall get bigger during the inhalation piece and smaller during the exhalation piece. So for that, I change my cueing just a little bit. Instead of having one on the stomach, one on the chest, I'm going to take 2 fingers, put them below the belly button like so. Because a lot of times what people will mess up on this is they won't let the ab wall get smaller, all right? So what you want to do is you want to take the same inhale as we did previously with the tongue on the roof of the mouth. The exhale is going to be long and slow, and you want to feel the ab wall get smaller, almost drop towards the ground like this. Well, of course, we don't want this, which is the belly breathing strategy, which is totes my goats, whack. So it's in through the nose, long exhale, ab wall smaller. Now, the ab wall is small, you feel a little bit of ab activity because that's what makes the ab wall smaller. Just try to preserve whatever tension you got during the next inhale, which is quiet through the nose like this. That's basically how I coach breathing. Now, there can be some advantages to also incorporating a pause after the exhale, because this can increase your CO2 tolerance, which is useful if you're doing any type of activity that might build up kind of the lactic acid thing, for lack of a better term. So think some higher intensity efforts, among other things. You don't want to force it to air hunger, but what you can do is after that exhale, just focus on pausing until you experience that first little bit of air hunger, and then quietly inhale through the nose. You don't want to go so far through it where you exhale and then you got to do this, right? Because then now we're going into an accessory breathing strategy because your body's kind of freaking out because it hasn't gotten any O2 movement. And so that looks like this, the controlled pause. And that would be it. And you know, actually, if you hear quietly, I probably waited a little too long because you heard that initial, and ideally you want to try to circumvent that or avoid that. Now, if I go a lot longer, it's actually going to be even more dramatic. So I'm going to show you that next. That one's tough. You kind of need that oxygen, you know what I'm saying? So we don't want that. Instead, we want the former piece. Now, if you're thinking, I might be actually breathing in through my nose a little bit during that, and I really want to take advantage of the controlled pause, you can simply, after you exhale, just plug your nose, just like that. Rinse and repeat. And there you have the proper way to coach diaphragmatic breathing. Hopefully now you know why your boy Big Z does not utilize belly breathing, both from a biomechanical standpoint as well as what you should do instead. What struggles have you had coaching breathing? Are there things that I missed within this video that you need guidance on? If that's the case, go ahead, like the video and comment below so we can let the fam know and enhance the quality of this experience. If you really want to dive into how to coach breathing effectively, I would definitely check out my seminar, Human Matrix. You can sign up for that at zachcouples.com/seminars. Links down below to check out where I'm going to be located at next. If you want to learn more about breathing, biomechanics, coaching, among other things, go ahead, check me out at zachcouples.com. And while you're here, like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, do all the things you need so you can keep learning from me.
Otherwise, thank you so much for tuning in. You've been an incredible, outstanding audience, and I hope that you keep real but not to the extent where things go wrong. Stay hungry, stay learning, stay moving, and I'll see you next time. Deuces.